So, can I ask you a quick question? I want to make sure I get the number right. So you said exclusion from the permit for 12,500?
Right. We're consistent with the notification tier under Cal Recycle guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I know
we're going to go really late here, but I found that list to be helpful. Do the rest of you have a list? I know there was your general list, but...
those are most helpful because then we can roll
Right.
through them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we'd like to know too.
I did provide that list to Scott.
Next, we have the local government panel. I have Deborah Raphael, Director, San Francisco Department of the Environment, Khalil Garrios, Manager, City of Los Angeles Bureau of Sanitation, also Jim Marchese, also Manager for the City of Kevin Barnes, Solid Waste Director, City of Bakersfield, and Larry Sweetser, Regulatory Affairs Advocate, Rural County Representatives of California. All right. So you all have figured out how to organize yourselves so I can relax and not worry about failing you or anything?
Are we on? Well, good evening. I'm Kevin Barnes, the Solid Waste Director for the City of Bakersfield. My colleagues here have graciously let me go first because I have to be on Amtrak at 6:25. So I will talk and dash. We are the owner and operator of probably the largest public sector compost facility there is in California or America. We've been doing it for 20 years. We've been doing wet food waste and other food waste for 10 years. So if there's ever a place to look into a glass house that's got open books and government reporting, it's us. We have been doing all this for a long time. I do agree with a lot of what I've seen today, that there's a threat to groundwater. If it's not properly done, we can really mess things up. We're not trying to shirk responsibility either. But I do need to point out that we are a site that happens to have groundwater monitoring data for more than the 20 years that we've been there. And according to all the data here, there is no impact. Now, that might be because of our climatologic situation. It may be because we purchase every drop of water and pay to apply it. No one pays us to take their effluent and get rid of it. So there are different things, as some of the other speakers mentioned today, that go into the equation of how much water is seeping out the bottom of the pile in the bad picture. Okay, we don't. And therefore, we have to request that we would have a little more give and take on this general order. It's necessary, yes. We've suggested some things in the past. Some of them made it in, some of them didn't. I would like that to be revisited because we're public servants, just as you are. We have to turn around and raise the public's refuse fees to pay for the facility, to comply with the mandates. And we want to do that at the lowest cost in the most responsible manner. We would be, we think that that would be finding out if indeed there is a problem first before we run off and invest large sums of money in some controls. I agree with you, Madam Chair, that we can't let it slide down the slippery slope. Just because we haven't seen a problem doesn't mean there never will be a problem. Correct.
Created a problem because you're a good steward doesn't mean that other people wouldn't.
That's correct. And so, yes, there is an order necessary. But at least in our case, and in probably some others around California, it would be prudent to give another degree of alternative, or I believe they call it engineered alternative, to determine whether some of these mandated control assets are necessary. Okay.
You've suggested that.
Pardon me?
Suggested what form that would take.
We have. I'd like to ask you to grant Leslie and her crew more time to work on that. I know there's been changeover in the staff. That's unfortunate. I've had long conversations with prior staff members. So we, in fact, have discovered that the aerated static piles, which some people pictured, are going to save us 2/3 of the production water that we use. We're dying to move over to that. We almost had a Department of Water Resources, Water and Energy grant to do it. We missed. But our endeavor is to spend our public's money on that to conserve water and not on what we see as unnecessary controls for our site. So we'd like that opportunity. I'd like to point out something else too, a couple of more big picture things here. Someone said a few minutes ago, I believe it was Chairman or Member Moore, with the food waste coming in, there will be a likelihood that facilities will get paid for that to receive it. And that will probably displace a lot of green waste that is currently composted. Unless we have the compost facility capacity in California, the green waste or the food waste that's going to be paid for, and mind you, I manage hauling too. I manage the 9th largest hauling entity in California. So we're a pretty good garbage bin too. I see that food waste displacing the green waste, making the problem about ADC, or excuse me, land app, getting worse, okay, with our mandates. So beware. We have to be careful to allow the food waste to come in. And another thing, the food waste may not be able to come in under this general order. Depends on how we interpret one of these definitions. I've talked with Cal Recycle on this. I've talked with water board staff. But I'll give you an example. Bakersfield composts about 40 tons a day. That's 4 big trucks full of ice cream and candy bars. They're in wrappers. They're rejects from a factory. We have to compost wrapper and all. We have built a leading edge program for food waste, school cafeterias, restaurants, you name it, that takes what we call plastics on purpose. Because we can get food waste diverted into thousands of tons per year, where pure food programs only go in hundreds of tons per year. So we believe our approach is not for everyone, but we're able to handle it. We're very successful. And so I caution that with these definitions that say food waste is the soiled paper and the actual food, well, what about the wrapper? Technically, you can interpret us as a municipal solid waste composter. Now, we don't think we are. We don't look like one. We don't smell like one. We don't act like one. But in the Cal Recycle definitions and in this definition, we don't fit under food waste composting. Yet, we're one of the most successful food waste composters around. So caution about how we're going to define the plastic wrapper, because I predict, as a garbage man, all of the trash companies in California are going to be needing to pick up food with wrappers to make the collection economics work. If we want pure watermelon rind only programs, we're only going to get hundreds of tons. We will not get millions of tons.
You can't see the clock, but you're...
Right, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say,
you.
this is great, and look
Okay.
forward to talking with you, but you're
Is
going
my
to miss your
train left
train
yet?
unless you go, taking your colleagues.
I just want to ask a quick,
Concede, thank you
very
for doing
quick
that.
question. So what you're saying is that your food waste that you're composting is also wrapped in plastic. So you're grinding the plastic up into small pieces and then
A
spreading.
large degree of that is, if you stay tuned to the industry magazines, you'll see the tricks, how we do it.
Send us links.
But it constitutes MSW under some definitions.
And no, that's important.
And where does that compost go with the plastic ground up in it?
We screen the plastic out.
Okay.
Pardon me for the
No,
schedule.
no, I'm
but
sorry we were so late. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to talking with you more.
Turn it on. There we go. Good evening. It's an honor to be here. Debbie Raffel, Director of the Department of the Environment. I just want to commend you for you sticking around and allowing us to speak. I know it's been a very long day for you, and I appreciate that. Clearly, the Water Board is been immersed in discussions around drought. You have been fully engaged in climate issues about greenhouse gas reductions, and it's been truly a long process to get this far, and I was very impressed today listening to the length of time that your staff have worked on this, and very appreciative of their responsiveness. So we get to a point in time where local governments are looking at the rules before them, and nobody else wants more than us in the local government world to prevent pollution. In our world, in our minds, recycling and composting are incredibly important, and they cannot pollute. So we are in full agreement with that. What I wanted to do today on behalf of San Francisco is just give you a sense of how important food waste composting is to our city in the way we are looking at climate change. It's not to tell you anything you don't know already in terms of the importance of composting, but just to start with the frame. When in San Francisco, we understand and we believe that cities are actually the most important scale to start to address issues around climate change. We are the scale where you can have innovation, where you can truly make a difference on a short-term basis and quickly respond to opportunities. In order to do that at the behavior change level, we need to be able to communicate with our residents and our businesses and our government agencies in a way that they understand to avoid wonky sorts of goals around climate. We have come up with this frame, which I just want to share with you visually. It is 0, 50, 100 roots. 0, 50, 100 roots. For everybody back there, that's what it looks like. The important point of that is zero waste, 50% of transportation in sustainable modes, 100% renewable energy, and supporting carbon sequestration. That's the roots. So we believe that when we talk about climate change in that frame, people understand what to do and how to respond at the business level, at the individual level. What's important to share with you about that is food waste composting then becomes a core part of our climate change narrative, because it's the zero waste part and it's the composting part, the roots part at the end. So from San Francisco's perspective, talking about climate change, you are talking about food waste composting. We collect 650 tons a day at this point. We have a place to take it. We have 2 facilities where it goes. We understand the finances of it, and we've built it into our rate process. Right now, composting and recycling are cheaper than landfilling. We do that not because the true cost is, because that's our rate structure. So we have a place to take it, but we're very worried about how we scale up. If we're going to get to zero waste, we're going to need to have larger facilities and facilities that can maintain over time. So as you've heard, the Air Board is worried about food because of methane production. CalRecycle is worried about food because of diversion. And we understand it cannot be a pollution shift. We cannot shift the burden from air to water. We totally get that. So where's our heartburn? Our heartburn has to do with something what I would call being intellectually honest about the impact of these regs. And that has to do with the financial analysis. And at one level, maybe it doesn't matter if the financial analysis is off. At the end of the day, are these protective? Maybe that's all that matters. But to us, that intellectual honesty is really important because that 25 million is incredibly out of whack with reality. So why do we care about that? Why is it important for that to go back, to have the board ask staff to go back and re-look at that impact? For 2 reasons. Number one, when local governments are doing the rate analysis and trying to figure out how do we set up our rate structure and our system for the future, we have to really understand what the true costs of composting are going to be on a per ton basis. If you look at the estimate that's in the report right now, it's grossly underestimating what we're looking at in the future. The second problem with us is that I think it's clear from looking at the cap and trade money allocation that there's a tremendous interest in putting some of that money into composting facilities. There's an understanding on a statewide scale about the importance. If we are going to make the case for the kind of assistance that those businesses are going to need, we're going to have to be very honest about what it costs to truly compost and be protective of the environment. So it does us no service to have too low numbers there. Even if the regs stay the same, we need to be honest about what it's going to cost to do it right. Because Board Member Moore, I totally appreciated your analysis, your analogy with the, oh my God, the water, the recycled water, yeah. I mean, if we're going to up that, we need to do it properly. And then we need to own what is the true cost, because that's something we all have to understand. So the other, and you wanted specifics about what the heartburn is. So 3 areas of heartburn. One is the economic analysis. Second, and these aren't actually new, but I'm going to echo some of the things you've heard. When we look at how we are protective, we want protections to be truly cost effective and therefore worthy of that protectiveness. And when you look at the definition of stormwater and you make everything into wastewater, when you conglomerate it into one kind of water, you lose some opportunity to be a little more nuanced in the way these are regulated, so that water that falls on an area of the system that isn't touching a pile should be treated differently than water that touches an area that has an active pile on it. The second area is that if you've gone to these facilities, which I know you have, you know the importance of reusing water on the systems. And if it's classified as wastewater, then you run into problems with CalRecycle and how they can use that water back on the composting. So that's an area we'd like to look into more. And finally, not distinguishing between the kinds of piles in terms of the impermeable surfaces. Having the same requirements for a pile that is in process and active versus a pile that's gone through this whole process is very stable and would end up on land application afterwards by definition. Not distinguishing that, again, you lose the ability to be a little more nuanced in the way these sites are regulated based on the reality of the operation, and therefore the cost effectiveness we think is compromised. So in closing, I just want to say we're at an amazing moment in time. There's a daunting challenge ahead of us around climate change, and composting presents an amazingly elegant solution, an elegant solution that's based on natural ecosystem functioning. That's a wonderful thing. And so what we want is the Water Board to set guideposts, but not roadblocks. And we believe that's possible within this order with not a huge amount of change, but some significant opportunities for nuanced approach. And so we're asking you to help us in that matter. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Khalil Garrios. Madam Chair, board members, stakeholders, thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Khalil Garrios, Division Manager, LA Sanitation. As an environment leader, LA Sanitation commends the board, the State Water Resources Board, for taking this leadership role in ensuring that composting facilities are operated without impacting the quality of the water of the state. In fact, we are committed without qualification to water quality at all discharge points. Our position is water quality is not negotiable, and we are ready to comply with the general order. We also commend the board for acknowledging and recognizing that composting operation is very important to reducing the waste that is generated in the state of California. And we also recognize the need to ensure that composting facilities, particularly as they expand to meet the additional challenges for additional diversions, are protecting water quality. So what are we asking for? And in finding number 20 in the proposed general order, state that composting operation have the potential of degrading water. Madam Chair, I totally 100% agree with you. Why we want to wait to make sure we're degrading so we can act and be reactive. However, if we have a facility, if you know a facility that has been operating under an existing waste discharge requirement that has not, based on 12 years of data, surface water and groundwater, that has not impacted or degraded the water of the state. We asked the staff to just visit more facilities. I know we heard about visiting 8 facilities. They're all Tier 2 facilities that were visited. And I'm sure if the staff has visited Tier 1 facilities, because there are a lot of them out there too. Since we operate under a current WDR, we're asking the board to just allow facility that already existing, operating in WDR and not degrading water quality to stay under the current WDR. Because we are hearing through the grapevine, and I know it's not official yet, but that regional water board, local board, are going to just amend the current WDR that facilities are working under to just make sure that they are under general order. So they're just going to send letters saying, okay, now the general order applied as of this date, we are going to revise the WDR for facilities to be under general order. And we don't see the need for it if we have not degraded any groundwater or surface water. Also, the requirement for the design and operation of detention pond to contain and reuse wastewater, I think it created impediment to the operation, mainly if we're only talking about Tier 1 facilities, or I want to call it maybe Tier 1A facility. If you are only composting green waste without anything in it, just green waste, I don't see the reason why we need to have a pond to collect that water. And in the top of that, some of the composting facility, and a lot of them, operate on the top of a landfill that is closed. And we are prohibited under our current WDR and all landfill to have a pond on the top of the landfill. We cannot build such a thing on the top of a landfill. So what we're asking is to reconsider the requirement for the detention pond for Tier 1 facilities. And in addition to that, to make sure that there are no contamination to any waters, maybe the dry weather collection would be collected instead of the rainy weather. As San Francisco is saying, it'd be a much lot water to deal with, even if it doesn't hit the pile in question. Lastly, many of the requirements in the proposed general order are design-based and structured such as one-size-fits-all. A facility located in a part of the state with certain physical properties should not be treated in the same as a facility that a totally different part of the state with totally different physical properties. I can say, I don't think, facility that's located in San Bernardino should be treated the same way as a facility located up north, in the shallow groundwater area. So it should be looked at differently. So we're asking if the proposed order to be performance-based, less prescriptive requirements, and more adaptive approach to protecting the water of the state. We believe the general order should establish performance criteria and at the discharge point, and then require the owner and operator, municipality, to submit a monitoring and BMP compliance plan based on the site-specific condition. Thank you.
Jonathan, I'd like you to respond to this, but maybe see if I'm on the right track here. A lot of times when we're doing these general orders, the existing facilities get pretty worried, that we're going to impose this whole new set of requirements. But in actuality, we try to design these so that there's actually efficiencies, and the regional board is given a lot of flexibility, and I'm seeing that in the proposed order. Could you help illuminate these concerns?
I think there is some concern and misunderstanding. My understanding, and if it's not correct, we will ensure that it does become corrected, is that composting facilities on top of existing landfills are already covered by the landfill's more protective Title 27 requirements and are not subject to this general order, and we would not require them to be enrolled in this general order.
That's number one.
Yeah, that's number one. So there are large composting activities that are going on associated with waste discharge with wastewater treatment plants that we saw some in the pictures and we heard some discussion about those. Those are part of the waste discharge requirements under that POTW, and they are not going to be required to move under this order. So now we've got two. Now there is a third category, which are existing waivers, existing orders, low threat orders. There's a kind of a slew of different things out there, and I can't answer in each one of those instances categorically like I could with those other two. Existing waivers for composting would be rolled into this because they are not they are not an order at this point. The indication that we had from San Diego, which has the largest number, is that they would plan to move them into this operation.
Also expire, the waivers expire.
They expire every 5 years and have to go through the same process where WDRs can be lengthened to 15 years. Now, the existing individual WDRs that are for complex facilities are unlikely to roll into this. They have been designed for that facility. The regional boards are looking for a way to enroll the unknown but fairly significant number of facilities that are not under any order today. And that's what this order is about. I'm very happy to hear people's concerns, and we'll be looking at all of these concerns, because the point of this is that it's set for those that have what we would call Tier 2 facilities. The Tier 1 facilities we consider a low threat discharge, and we want to try and cover them in a economically and reasonable manner. I'm listening to what people say. I've taken a lot of notes. I'm going to listen to what the other folks say, and we're going to be talking to staff about how we deal with that issue. I think that we have there is a disconnect between what we're concerned about and what is perceived in the order, which is we're concerned about the generation of leachate from facilities that have certain types of waste constituents, and that those need to be controlled, and that leachate needs to be controlled. We are not concerned about the finished product piles, and we are not concerned about rainwater that falls on a site that isn't touching material. But it needs to be clear that it's not touching material, and not that so I'm starting to wander.
No, it's okay. And also, when we look at certain design recommendations, as we've done with the general permit for the drinking water discharges, which was a 2014 project that we accomplished, we were able to, there's a corollary there where certain management practices are implemented, so the monitoring to confirm it is vastly reduced because we know those management practices protect water quality. Similarly, if these designs are into the new facilities, and Scott Couch, you can answer this question, but there's certain trade-offs that we're trying to empower regional board staff to be able to make in terms of monitoring requirements versus design. If you've designed a system that's at a certain hydraulic conductivity, the monitoring is vastly or reduced or eliminated. I mean, these are common general order type mechanisms that I'm seeing in the draft now, but maybe we can refine.
Right, and we tried to put in engineered alternatives and provide for alternatives for the most expensive of these items, which would be the working surfaces and the wastewater ponds and that kind of thing. So we tried to build in things, and sorry to contradict my boss over here, but as the order is written right now, we do include the finished product if it's included on that working surface.
No, I know that. I was just commenting on what we heard today.
Okay.
But there's also there's an opportunity for the regional board staff to look at site-specific circumstances and evaluate risk and tailor monitoring requirements accordingly.
Exactly. The monitoring and reporting program that's in the general order is a model, so they can take things out of there or modify that or issue a monitoring and reporting program specific to that facility.
What about the issue? I mean, there have been a lot of issues raised, and we don't have time tonight to go through them all. I know you're taking notes, and we will talk about how to deal with them all. I'm not entirely sure how you deal with them by July 7th. I find that hard to imagine.
That depends on what you tell us. So,
well, deal with a lot of them. Like every issue that's come up, you have to deal with, I think. I mean, it doesn't mean they're right or not, but there's a communication issue to be dealt with at a minimum.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, on the financial analysis, we need to manage expectations of what that means. I understand your point about sending certain signals, but we're not, indicating that, this is the final say on the economic impact of regulating discharge from compost facilities. This is an economic considerations analysis that's high level. We're supposed to hit the order of magnitude and then implement the program to protect water quality. And also from a legal standpoint, I don't know if our counsel is still here, there is a certain threshold for economic evaluations on general orders. It may not be as high as what the commenters are indicating here. So I may be a minority voice on the board here, but I don't consider that a make or break issue in terms of moving forward with a general order that has a lot of flexibility built in. It's to give a sense, a general sense of the high level economic considerations. It's not, a full-fledged economic analysis as some have been making it out to be.
I'm going to jump in here on that. I know we're not wrapping up, but since Board Member Moore raised that point, I agree with the concern that industry is raising about the economic analysis. Now, we may not be required from a legal perspective to get it right, but at the same time, if pretty much across the board they're saying that this is going to cost more than what we're saying, then we end up having a sort of a trust challenge that we need to get past. And I don't know that that's the only issue. I think another issue is a disconnect that staff worked hard to provide for a lot of flexibility, but the industry is not really seeing that flexibility. And I guess they may not be seeing it because they don't really know how the regional board is going to deal with an engineered solution or the exact amount of monitoring. So I don't know how we close that gap, because if you have a facility and you think that you have to go with the most costly option, then certainly our analysis looks way off, even though that's not our intent. But for these people that are in business, that's they have to figure out a way to communicate this. And so before we even get to whether or not we need to redo the analysis, my question would be, and I don't know how we do this, how do we close that gap between what folks think they have to do or what they fear they may have to do versus what the order allows for?
But I see peril, quite frankly peril, if we don't take action fairly quickly because of the goals that are being set, the climate goals that are being set, the number of composting facilities that are being set, and going back to the issue of ocean desalination. Poseidon spent 12 years bouncing around to various and sundry permitting agencies because there were no rules. Now we can make them, these may be perfect, these may need some tweaking. I don't think they need an overhaul. I really don't think they need an overhaul. And I think I think quick action, whether it's the 7th or the 14th or the whatever the next one, 21st, I don't really care. But if it's October, I don't think that's right. Or if it's next year, I think that's terrible. And so that's just where I stand on delay.
Well, isn't that interesting what I prompted? But
Madam Chair.
No, that's fine. It's understandable. But I mean, the concern is just, I obviously focus on the public policy aspect of communicating clearly. You've seen me do this a lot, and I just want to make sure these are resolved and that we look at I appreciate the panel saying there are specific suggestions. I think the point of this workshop is for us to hear it and to stay here listening. I know I've argued a little bit with people, and there's some hot buttons I have, having lived through MTV, which was so great for the air, but then ended up being a nightmare because folks didn't think about those other impacts. And so that's not to say there are massive impacts. It is that we have to deal with those impacts. A wrong and a good don't make a good, frankly, on this one. I'm sorry, I'm just riffing on that. But
Madam Chair, if you don't have any more questions for me, our flight leaves at 7:40, so we have to.
You may go.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I guess that I have one real question that keeps coming up, is that in our presentation we talk about the cost of the pads, and we talk about the cost of the pond, and we talk about the cost of construction of drainage, and it it's a significant number, and it's based on per acre because it's scalable. Those don't happen to be the scenario that we chose to do the economic analysis. But it's not like we've hidden the costs associated with it, or that we've portrayed that these costs aren't real and aren't there. And so I'm not really sure that going back and taking these numbers and running a different scenario helps anyone. But having these numbers here, the reason that I asked them to be in this is so that they're in the record, so that people have a good idea that if you need to put in a pond and you need to put in an installation, these are the costs, and these are real costs, or we tried to make them real costs, and we heard from other people that those costs are fairly in line for the amount.
Right.
But that's different than going back and publishing our EIR through another 90-day or 120-day or 6-month process to go through so that we can run a different scenario analysis. And so I'm very happy to look at making it clear that these costs here are very variable, and here are the costs for this scenario, here's the cost for that scenario. I'm very reluctant to open up and go through our EIR process again, because the last time we did that, it took us 2.5 years, and that's from 2013 to 2015. And I don't believe that if you ask the folks in the room that resulted in them feeling like they had a better product in the end. It just meant we spent 2.5 years working on providing the EIR, but the process, the permit itself didn't change. I would rather focus our effort on making sure that we are regulating the right piece of the facility in the right way. And so
explaining what your numbers mean better than you have without having to reopen the EIR. I mean, you're jumping to a conclusion about what I said.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I touched on.
Or get people to feel more comfortable with the lower cost because we've clarified the language so that that they realize that truly is an option.
So all I'm saying is the whole point of this workshop is so that we can hear from everybody.
Yes, exactly.
And we're hearing things that need to be rationalized and discussed. Maybe you can do that very quickly in a way that feels great to us. It doesn't have to feel great to everybody in the room, but it's got to feel right to us, or we don't act.
Well, no, I understand. That's why the reason we're having a workshop, and that
Exactly.
And that we plan to listen to direction from the board members on how to move forward next. I wasn't trying to be flippant when I said that's kind of up to you. I really do see that it's up to you as the board to give us direction on how many changes and in what direction that we should go.
Right. And you probably wanted to get to your 5 minutes.
Well, I don't have any trains to catch. I apologize, I'm not Mary Pitto.
Other people probably do, and there is another panel. So
Yeah, she got called away on something, so I got given this assignment a little while ago. I'm Larry Sweetser. I'm a consultant for the rural counties, rural county representatives of California. Just a little bit of background. We have 34 counties membership. Most of it's Northern California down the eastern side, with a few others scattered in between. So the statistics we like to brag about is we cover more than half of California's landmass, but we have less than 10% of the population and less than 8% of the solid waste. So the amount of work that we do there doesn't really impact the 75% as much as some of the other jurisdictions. But nonetheless, we still try to do our share. Obviously, in a rural area, we have less tonnages than other people do, so we have to accommodate those. Therefore, we need smaller facilities. Accessing the larger facilities that others are building just are not feasible because of the distance involved. Some of our counties are very huge in terms of distance they have to travel for anything, let alone trying to haul large amounts of heavy material somewhere. So the economic feasibility is real important to us. Some people were concerned earlier about the cost of disposal and the cost of green waste materials, processing, handling, forcing more of it into landfills or land application. We have an even bigger concern forcing a lot of it to illegal dumping. We have a major problem. Every time we raise our rates a little bit, we end up with massive amounts of illegal dumping. We can easily see that happening if some of our facilities have problems and have to go away under this scenario. The other thing to consider is a lot of our organics is a lot different than many of the other municipalities. We don't have a lot of green lawns. We don't have a lot of landscaping out there. We have a lot more brush piles, particularly with fire clearing. That material doesn't compost very well without a lot of extra work. We have a lot more on-site ag material. A lot of the ag lands are in our jurisdiction, so we have to deal with that component as well. Particularly manure. Manure is an issue where a lot of our facilities handle that. So we are doing interesting things with composting with pine needles, which I didn't think was as feasible as it is, but it actually is working pretty well. But that's a lot different composting green material brush with pine needles than it is a lot of grass. So we have to consider that analysis. We did take a look at some of the facilities that CalRecycle has listed that have composting and mulch facilities in our jurisdictions. We probably have about over 50 of them in our rural county membership. So that's a good portion of the state's numbers of facilities, not in terms of quantity, but out of that, only about 10% of them would qualify for any exemption under this. Very few of those. About a fourth of them would fall under a tier 1. It's about 10%, depending how you look at the facilities and conversion factors, because many of them are in small tons versus cubic yards. Most of them would fall under tier 2, primarily because they're handling manure, or we actually do have some larger facilities over the tier 1 limits, and those are the ones that concern us. One example of that is one of our larger facilities in Amador County is a private facility, Vicini Brothers. They're permitted at 50,000 cubic yards. So that would force them into a tier 2 because of the quantity that they're handling there. They could probably survive with the compliance under tier 1, but forcing them with that volume into tier 2 makes it almost unfeasible. Their analysis would cost, just for the pad alone requirements for the size of their acreage, would be over $200,000. And for a small facility, which we consider that small, would essentially force them to close when the 6 years is up. They provide a lot of material for the home gardeners, the vineyards. Caltrans takes some. We have some service in the North Tahoe Public Utilities. So they do have uses for that. So it actually is a workable product in our area. It also handles about 10% of Amador's solid waste. And if that facility goes away, that dramatically impacts our ability to diversion significantly in the negative. It would probably put the county out of compliance with CalRecycle's mandates. So that really concerns us with that facility. And they have allowed us to offer the board and staff a tour of that facility. It's only an hour away, even though it's rural, but it's out there, and they would be glad to host a tour, so you can let us know about that. My list of suggestions would be, one, to appreciate if you could raise some of the exemption levels for some more of our facilities could qualify without having to go under the general permit. Secondly, more allowance for the drier climates. We have a lot of high desert areas. We don't have the rainfall. We have, similar to Bakersfield, long distances to groundwater. So maybe having that allowance for those facilities in the drier climates, particularly on the tier rankings. And a third one would be to raise those capacity limits for especially tier 1 facilities to a higher number would help out a number of our jurisdictions that are only handling ag material, but are forced into a higher limit just because of that. So if there's a big jump between tier 1 compliance and tier 2, and in some of them it's going to be insurmountable.
Number would you put?
Doubling it would be easier for some of those facilities, or even going up to 50,000 for tier 1 for the ag only type materials. The tier 1 materials only, if they're handling that, if they could go to a higher limit, would help a number of the facilities. And they'd still be under tier 1. They'd still be under your requirements for a general order, and they're all still going to be under CalRecycle's mandates. We have, that facility alone is under a notification tier. They get quarterly inspections by the LEA, our local enforcement agency, the arm of CalRecycle. They are out there looking at not just the solid waste compliance, they look at water issues. They don't have the authority, but they will look at that, and if they see an issue, they will bring it to attention or note it in their log, or even worst case, contact regional board. So it's not like it's being ignored. They are under purview now quite significantly. I mean, a quarterly inspection, or in some of them even monthly inspections, are happening now.
So you're saying that they do collect information on water, on standing water, standing leachate, but they don't have anywhere to take it. They take that information, so they just collect it?
In the LEAs or the sites?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
the LEAs will, if they see standing water there, Just like on a landfill case, they will bring it to the attention of the operator. If it's minor, it may just be a notice. Otherwise, it could be an area of concern or even a violation rather easily. There is that crossover authority on water issues, especially when it's in contact with solid waste materials. So they do pay attention to that. And if it's severe enough, they will contact regional board staff without much hesitation on their part. So it's not like it's going unmonitored. It is being monitored, even if they were handling higher amounts of that material. So the third one would be increasing those levels. A fourth one was kind of curious looking at comparing the percolation rates in the table here for the green waste materials in Tier 1. I noticed it was the same as for the on-site wastewater treatment facilities. So septic tanks have the same percolation rate in this requirement as for compost Tier 1 facilities. So that kind of was curious to us and to some of our environmental health folks on why it was that stringent. And a fifth one just occurred to me that a lot of people are concerned about the compliance and the cost of doing this, and because we don't know what the regional boards may do, and maybe other people are under the same assumption I was, that regional boards had to go with this package and go more for any feasibility. And I'm wondering if it's possible that they could maybe do lesser standards, maybe include the drier climates, the higher limits under their individual orders in the regional boards, rather than using this as a starting point and then going more stringent. And it sounds like from some of the discussion that might be what's being considered and might be less scary to many of those out there.
The flexibility to the regions goes both ways. Is there an option? I thought about the drier climate and as well as what if there's no groundwater?
So let me try and parse that out, because that's not a simple answer. The way that the order is drafted today, if it qualifies for this, and there isn't some threat to water quality that the regional board has identified, then this order would apply, because we weren't trying to create an order that the regional boards could decide they wanted to use, or maybe they'd write their own order, because that defeats the purpose of doing a statewide general order, to be blunt. So it isn't designed as an optional permit if it meets the criteria. And I'm sorry, now I forgot the other part of the question.
Well, the issue was the flexibility, because there was a point made about regional board flexibility going up.
No, the concept is that this is a general order that would apply to compost facilities that meet the specifics, and there are specifics in there that make it eligible for, and if they meet it, then this is what they would be applied to, would apply to them. If they don't meet the criteria in here, then they would need a general order. Now, there are a couple of exemptions to that, which we talked about earlier, which are sites that are on top of landfills that already have a permit, or sites that are part of a POTW that already have a permit. So, but it's not, I think the suggestion was, well, we should allow the regional board to use it if they want, or write their own order if they want, and that wasn't the intent.
Was something along those lines with additional clarification for more flexibility within the order.
We are happy to add more flexibility within the order. We have tried as best we can to provide flexibility. I would say that there are two pieces about the climate issue that are worth thinking about. One is if you have low rainfall events, then the issue about the pond becomes very much smaller, because you don't have that rainfall event, so you're building a much smaller pond. But you do have, it doesn't negate the need to restrict groundwater percolation, or percolation in the groundwater. I do understand that it takes a long time in some areas, if you've got a long distance for the ground to percolate, but it's still moving to the groundwater.
What if there's not groundwater?
So there are a few places
that don't have protected water.
No, there are. That's correct, and that should be, if there's no beneficial use, if there's no groundwater there, then that should be looked at as part of that. I would agree with with that assessment. Though there is a definition for what is groundwater, and it is it includes a pump rate, essentially, amount that you can get out. So it's not that this is a giant aquifer. Low yield aquifers still are protected.
Brian, I'm just thinking about the SB4 definition. I don't want to have stricter requirements for composting than I do for fracking.
That's correct.
Making a point here.
Right. There are a few places in the state, but they are few and far between, is what we're finding with.
Jonathan, if I may add a couple points. This is Shala Farnock, Assistant Deputy Director of the Groundwater Branch, Division of Water Quality. One thing I wanted to address was Board Member Diodamo's concern about how do you deal with this whole dilemma of you don't know what the regional board's going to act. And I think we have come to the conclusion that the best way to take some of that uncertainty out is to come up with the general orders that specify the requirements. Our challenge has always been, both from the stakeholders and sometimes even from the regional boards, that they want flexibility, but they also want certainty. And it's kind of hard to balance that. And I believe that in this order, we've tried to balance that because we were fortunate enough to have a team of regional boards and CalRecycle, which had a lot of the concerns of the stakeholders in mind, work with us. So we sat through many hours of those meetings talking about what these limitations are. You know, what if we increase the size to this? Then can we instead so it's just kind of a balancing equation. So as we're talking about changing any of these factors, it may impact, it's sort of sending us back to square one. We definitely will be happy to look at these, but when you'll be looking at the size of the facilities, the limitations, the monitoring requirements, all of those, to the extent we could apply our best knowledge, kind of took into account and collectively came to the requirements. But I wanted to bring your attention, since we talked about what the order does, finding 13 within the order basically specifically confirms what Jonathan was mentioning, that for facilities that are under an existing waiver or a WDR, they can remain under that unless it's time to renew them or update them or they expire. At that point, the language specifically says it's our expectation that the regional boards are going to use this general order unless they determine the specific site conditions that would require it to be more stringent. And then when you're talking about cases when it may need to be less stringent, the draft of the resolution that we have sent to the board clerk in anticipation of coming to the board meeting, hopefully soon, before I retire, is that we have proposing basically restating the requirement, the statement that's in the water code. It happens to be, again, finding 13 of, I guess, number 13 of the resolution you haven't seen. But our intention is that this is the language we have. It says composting operations that in the judgment of a regional water board could not affect the quality of the waters of the state are not required to file a report of waste discharge and are not required to obtain coverage under the general order or individual order. So I think that with that language, we're taking care of the ones that maybe the regional board looks at the facility and they don't see a need for it to regulate it, or they think that it's appropriate to maintain what they have. And then for facilities that may need more stringent requirement, again, we have the requirements in there, but still the first line is to use this order. And then for the ones that are located in landfills, we specifically clarify that if they have an order that covers their composting operations, then they can remain under that order. If there are facilities where the landfill operations are under Title 27 and the regional board is still waiting to deal with the compost side of it, it's kind of separate, then at that point, I guess our expectation is that they would use this general order, because if they put them under Title 27, would be more stringent. So I hope that kind of clarifies. And then in terms of engineered alternatives, you're aware of the fact that we have those, and that's the maximum extent that would allow the regional boards to look at the facility and determine if they may need to make exceptions.
This may be getting us into more detail, but is there a process and a time frame involved for the regional water boards to make the finding that certain facilities and operations do not have the potential to impact water?
So the assumption in there is that the report of waste discharge will be filed, and they'll look at it and determine if there is no threat to water quality, then there is no need for a permit.
How would you help me think through, and I know we're presaging what we would do at the adoption hearing, and this just accelerates our thinking about it as we look at it. Let's say the gentleman from Bakersfield. You've got a facility, it's a big one, really big one. They have been doing the groundwater monitoring. They're not finding any impact. Do they have to go and do a football field-sized pad, or can they waive out?
So right now, they have the option of not installing the pad and continuing with their groundwater monitoring. It's already built into the permit.
Because they're
Exactly
already
that.
doing the groundwater monitoring.
Right. But there is another area to make, because I want to make sure you're clear and that we're being clear. They still have a requirement for a pond, and that pond needs to have a compacted soil or liner that would meet the 10 to the -6, right? Yes. And so that's an engineered pond. It's not just backhoe out and dig a hole. It needs to be compacted or a liner put on it. And so there is a cost. I don't know if his facility has a pond, but that is an issue that would have to be taken. Now, of course, he's in Bakersfield. The pond wouldn't have to be very big because you don't get the same level of storm events, but he would still have one, and that I expect is a new cost. I would also expect that they use a process, they said, to segregate out the plastics. So that's something that we would want to have under regulation. It wouldn't, in my mind, be a facility that you would want to have determined has no impact, because we have this process that needs to be monitored and kept under control because of the movement of plastics.
No, but his point wasn't that. His point was how it's categorized. Because of the plastics, he's concerned about being categorized as municipal solid waste rather than as food waste. That's worth looking at.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know the specifics yet of how that would be categorized.
We'll have to look at it. I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to resolve everything here. We're just flagging issues in a workshop.
Yeah, one thing, we're hearing suggestions on modifying tiering. Ms. Farnock mentioned, or cautioned against messing with certain thresholds that are recommended at this time, and yet there may be, some validity to this input, in terms of scaling where the cutoffs are in terms of where our tiers are. Do you have any response?
I understand Ms. Farnock's concern on not reopening issues, but we're here to hear about issues and concerns, and if we get direction to look at things, we will look at them, and we'll take the amount of time that we need to do that.
And in that regard, when we have these specific recommendations to change from 5,000 cubic yards a year up to 12,500 or 50,000, and that with some site-specific, regionally significant rural sites, I think we should look at that. And just in terms of, have we structured our tiering in a way? But I'll make my caveat is, if you're saying, what you're saying is there's no impact to waters that you know of, that's important if true. Just like the Marin compost example. It's important if it's true that there's no impact. I didn't hear from the Marin carbon project that they have any monitoring of surface water or groundwater to verify there's no impact. Maybe there is, but that didn't come out in his presentation. So, that we have to kind of circle back and ensure that these sites, if we do create an exemption at a certain quantity, that we indeed have water quality protection and we don't have to require the surveillance and that sort of thing that comes with an exemption. So I feel the information's incomplete for me to move quickly on that, and yet I think we should be open to modifying those benchmarks if we can calibrate them to reality and make this an operationally useful general permit.
Is to take all this in, because what would happen otherwise, we have the, and maybe you can do this by the 7th, you'll get everybody's comments. We're going to want to go over everybody's comments, and then we just
Sure.
send you back to redo it later. So the extent you can do a go-round of what we're hearing here today and convey it, you might.